to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, everyone, it's a real live official voting Board of Education meeting for the City School District. And we have 8 with us today. Sean Eversley Bradwell is under the weather a bit, and we hope for a quick recovery there. And but we have 8 and key administrative personnel. Yeah, Lee's good. I mean, so that's right. Key. And where are we? Where's there was a modification to the agenda?
There's a supplemental personnel report dated today.
I did see that.
It was added, but it was added late in the day, so.
That's the only modification?
One modification.
All right. So we do have some unfinished business from our organizational meeting on July 1st. We do need tonight to nominate and hopefully vote for a vice president of the board. That is the one position that we did not settle on the other time. So we will do that now, and we'll look for nominations. Chris.
I nominate Dr. Sean Eversley Bradwell.
Second.
Second by Moira. Other nominations.
Nominate Chris Malcolm.
Looking for a second.
I'll second.
Second by Ann. Okay. Other nominations. So we have Sean, we have Chris, and Jennifer. We vote now, right?
Let me catch up. I have to add 2 motions here, so I'm typing.
Right. That's why we're looking to Jennifer. Are we ready to go yet?
Is it something you want?
Do you wish? Right. You do not need to accept the nomination. Do an LBJ if elected. I will not serve.
And does Sean want to do it? Is anybody? Is something that Sean's expressing?
Nominate, right.
I'm aware that Sean very much would like to do it. So, and I support that wholeheartedly.
I'll withdraw my nomination.
But it was nice to give Chris the opportunity to speak to it. Chris has done it for a few years, and you ran the meeting once, I think, Chris. It was
very large shoes to fill.
Yeah, it was an exciting meeting.
The pressure was
overwhelming. So the vice president has a key role.
Can we insert a codicil that if Sean's vice president, he still has to be chair of the policy committee?
Yeah, that was my concern.
Right, that's...
Maybe this is his
Is there any way to make that legally binding?
There's going to be members of committees.
No, right, it's the vice...
It's the president who's not named a committee. It's the vice president.
But chair.
But we just wanted to be chair. I mean, if we were lucky enough to be reappointed to the policy committee. Yeah.
So,
regress on that one.
I think you'll be fine. I think you'll be
Say
okay.
some people. No, apparently there's.
So Jennifer, how are we doing down there?
So I removed the second motion, so we have 1 motion to nominate Sean Eversley Bradwell for vice president, by motion by Chris, second by Pat.
That's fine.
Is that correct?
I thought I saw.
Oh, yeah, I apologize.
No, we do want to get a Moira seconded. Are there any other nominations at this time? Not hearing or seeing any, so we will go ahead and vote now, correct?
You have your slips. You need to write the name and sign who you want to vote.
To make it official. We thank Chris for his service. Chris still gets to serve on all sorts of committees and visit all sorts of schools consistently and constantly.
That is my goal for the upcoming school year. I want to be more present in the schools and actually more actively engaged in school activities and goings on. I think we have a challenge. Well, we always have a challenging, school season, but I think there's always great stuff going on. We've got a fantastic school here. school district rather. Well, it's been a long summer.
Chris has been busy. So Jennifer, the results?
We have 6 votes for Sean and 2 abstentions.
So according to my math, Sean Eversley Bradwell has been elected to be the vice president of the board. Typically, we would have the vice president designee nominee go ahead and take the oath. Sean's not here. So once again, we get to drag this out a little bit. And as is typical, the vice president, the president of the board, and the superintendent gets together and we review the committee assignments, and we will do that shortly. Dr. Brown? Yeah. Kind of depending on Sean, we like to have the vice president's input, because that's not a decision that I would make alone. Really just try to get everybody where they want to be. And sometimes it can be a challenge, but there's a lot of liaison assignments and multiple committees, as everyone knows. So that will happen shortly, hopefully as soon as Sean's ready to go.
Yeah, I'll be touching on right now.
Right, and then we'll get the committee assignments out, and Jennifer, as soon as, we'll do that as soon as possible, then we'll have to set committee dates, and, you know, there was an idea, Brad, to do committees on the off Tuesdays? Is that
It was a suggestion.
just to get that out there? But we'll have to just gauge everyone's calendars, and once the committees are assigned, then you all get together and you figure out when you want to meet, and that working with Jennifer, obviously, on coordinating that effort and coordinating Jennifer's ability to be at those meetings as well, to take notes.
And my suggestion was to do on the first and third Tuesdays, do committee meetings, either 4:30 and 6:30, and have the four of the committees meet on the first and third Tuesdays. That way the staff know that Tuesday is the day, you know, and not moving around from Mondays and Thursdays and different days.
Wednesdays,
It was just a
Mondays.
thought to do it, you know, do a 4:30 meeting, 4:30 to 6, 6:30 to 8 for the second one, so you can do, we combined finance and facilities, so you can do that with, I don't know, curriculum, then the other one do policy and HR. Audit would be the odd man out, have to do that. But that's only quarterly anyway, so.
Audit's always odd, anyway.
So we can make that the odd man
But
out.
also, policy meets twice a month, so.
Maybe
Well,
we
no,
can
policy's scheduled
No.
twice a month, it
Oh,
hasn't
right.
met twice a month in quite a while,
Oh,
has it?
no, we frequently
Yeah.
meet twice a month.
Yeah.
It's the one that's canceled constantly.
Oh, no.
Reschedule, Brad.
Oh, rescheduled, excuse
We
me.
don't cancel anything.
No, we frequently met twice a
Did
month
you?
this
Yeah.
last year.
Huh?
Yeah, oh, yes.
Then maybe that doesn't work. I
Yeah.
don't know. I was trying to
Don't try to-
accommodate our own schedules and accommodate the staff schedules.
Well, it might though, if we,
If there's no overlap
Yes.
between two of
Right.
the committees.
to the committees.
Right.
Brad, you can't micromanage policy. They, you know.
I agree.
it's their-
No,
They
don't
flow.
want to.
They flow.
Well, also, though, with combining facilities and finance, is an hour and a half meeting enough?
No, they would have to be the
It all-
6:30 meeting.
Yeah, it depends on.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
6:30 you would go.
6:30 and-
They'd have to
yeah,
be
I
the
see.
6:30 meeting.
Both of them.
Yeah.
So, great conversations for next time, but, so, point being, those committee assignments will go out, everyone had an opportunity to input their choices, and we'll touch base on all that, Jennifer. Chris, did anyone sign up to speak? Correct? There's
We
no-
have no one,
Okay. This is an opportunity for the public to speak. I'm seeing like lots of staff, so we'll, Paul, you got anything? You're good?
Yeah.
Okay. So we can kind of roll on. Anything the board has to share at this point for board responses to anything that we've heard so far? Are we good? We good?
I have a question, but
Go ahead.
I don't see Denise. I would like to get a sense of how many community members are using are taking advantage or accessing our food distribution accounts this summer at various locations?
Yeah, the summer meal program.
Yeah, I was curious how well received and attended that is.
Albert, did you say how many community members?
Or just
Yes.
how many people,
How many people?
how many kids are you
How many
feeding?
kids? How many kids are we feeding?
I can find that out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Could you,
That'd be great.
Bounce that to everybody.
yeah, you send an email or put it
Yep.
in the Board Docs for us?
Right.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you, David. And so let's move on to the consent agenda.
I'll move the consent as presented.
Second.
Second by Chris. Anything to explain? We did
Well,
not
I'd
have.
like, yeah, we didn't have a committee meeting,
Right.
so now unfortunately becomes the time to ask questions.
Right.
The bids under number 10 for the summer capital projects, do we have, what was the budget for those?
Budget was about 190,000. The one bid came, am I correct on this? 143,000 for the two projects. The one project at Culp is actually finished, and it looks, I don't know if you've been over there,
Oh, I'm gonna
but it
walk
looks
over.
wonderful over
Good,
there.
good.
And I went over and I actually was shaking it today to make sure that it was actually
Trying to
going-
break it. Good.
Yes, exactly.
Was the concrete dry, David?
Well, it is now.
By this time, it should be.
We are looking at, out of the 190, it looks like it's going to be about 185,000 expense from the budget. Anything I'm missing there, Paul?
So it's
Amanda?
143
That's
under
right.
this bid and 40-something from another contractor?
It was 143 for LACS and Cuba Heights,
Yes.
and then it was the scoreboard, which was about
Oh,
12,000,
the scoreboard, right?
and which is also up.
We see that.
Yep, saw that.
And then the labor for Culp, because if you remember, we were just paying for the labor for that, and then other sundry expenses.
All right, so that contractor did provide the materials,
Correct.
costs?
And then
Yes.
the
That's
charges
good.
for the labor.
All right. Well, it's nice to have dealt with somebody who stood up.
Yeah, they did a nice job.
Okay.
And just a reminder that the scoreboard is not a capital reserve project. It's not coming out of the capital reserve dollars. It's actually out of the general fund.
That's out of the general fund, okay.
Does that happen? Yeah.
All right, so we're going to be under the 190 that we set for the summer projects, okay? And you've used this easy paving before, haven't you? You've dealt with them
Yeah,
We've
we've
seen
a
that name.
number of times.
They did the BJM playground.
Ah, that's where I remember the
And
name.
they also did Marcos Flats as well.
Oh, okay, the parking lot there and
Yep.
that, okay, all right, great.
Paul, the old scoreboard, does that go away or does it stay there as a
Yeah,
monument to?
Right now, we're getting the fields ready for practice,
Right.
which begins just in a couple of weeks soon, and then we'll have it taken down
Okay.
before then.
All right, just wondered. Anything else on the consent?
I'll just point out that even though it's the middle of the summer, we've got IPEI grants coming in,
So-
Triad Foundation grants
Right,
coming
so-
in. So we appreciate those, obviously.
All right, teacher stipends.
Yeah.
Correct.
It's all good.
All right, anything else? Move seconded, all in favor of the consent? That's everyone. Thank you. And more consent. Where are you, Dr. Brown?
I love how I always look for that place when it's.
Where are you? The consent goes on forever. There you are, Dr. Brown.
That's me. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, Ms. Davis. I have a special guest tonight, Mr. Negan, and with the time I'm allotted, I wish to have him speak about an outstanding collaboration with young people and administration at Boynton Middle School and teachers. And I think folks are seeing it as they drive by this summer. And he may answer some questions about what happened and who was responsible for it. So with that, Lee, I'm going to invite you up, and I'm going to show some images while you talk and speak to some of the fun things you did.
So the project that happened at Boynton is all about transformation. When I started teaching 40 years ago, I went into it not for increasing test scores, but to have relationships with kids and transform how they view themselves and their power to change the world around them. Boynton's outside has been deteriorating for a long time. It must have been over 20 years ago that there were ornamental crabs there that were cut down because a kid threw an apple and it hit the then music director in the eye. So the way we dealt with it was cut down all the trees. Those were in those beds around the building. And the yew bushes tended to get chewed by deer, and it ended up being just a weed patch. The space around the building is 150 feet long, 6 feet deep. So I got together with Jeff and spoke to him about transforming that space. I had a previous partnership with Rick Hedrick, who's the owner of Shrub Bucket. I had worked with him about 20 years ago when I worked with the Youth Horticulture Apprentice Program on the Commons, when I worked with our high school kids doing all the plantings on the Commons. He stepped up again and came up with a great deal for us on plant material. He gave us a significant discount, free delivery, free shipping, top quality plant material. And we were able to do an online registry to raise funds for this, kind of like a bridal registry. And with the power of Facebook and social media, we raised, I think, $1,200 or $1,400 in 5 days. So plant material was covered. Jeff had some money too. The first day that I started with the kids, we took shovels and hand dug the entire bed. We also had 2 dump truck loads of compost donated from Cornell Compost. The kids spread that, wheelbarrow and shovel, and they hand dug that in. The second day we had 4 dump truck loads of wood chips donated by the city of Ithaca from the Public Works Department. My daughter-in-law is the city forester, so between her crew and Buildings and Grounds crew, we got that there, and kids spread all that. So that was 2 days' work to get the site ready. The third day, we planted about 20 trees and shrubs. The fourth and fifth days, we planted over 250 perennials and ornamental grasses. The design for this was based on the bioswale at Cornell. So it's all deer-resistant plantings, multi-season interest, designed to attract butterflies, birds, beneficial insects, pollinators, and to function as an outdoor classroom. You know, there's a couple ways you can get teachers and kids interested in changing their instructional approaches. One is you can talk to them about curriculum design and involve them in those kind of trainings. And the other thing you can do is change the physical space that they teach in and work in. I had kids do all the work along with me, so there must have been over 200 kids total that participated. They came in batches of anywhere between 10 and 25 on 40-minute or 39-minute blocks throughout those 5 days. It's establishing, it's in bloom, and I think it's looking pretty good. We've got a couple teachers that have volunteered. Sanare, who teaches math, and Anne, who teaches Spanish, have been volunteering to do the watering this summer, which is yeoman's work.
Right, it's who's watering.
And it's watering.
For sure. What's neat is that teachers in the last couple weeks of school, when they walked by, said it was changing how they felt walking into the building.
Sure.
Changed how they felt about teaching. At the end of the day, when I was working with kids, I was listening to them, and kids were telling their friends, "That's my plant. I planted that." So there was that investment. There were kids who had never held a shovel in their life, who loved it, and said, "I would like to do this all day long. Why can't we do this instead of sitting in classes?" So it points out the need for us to get kids more physical and more actively engaged. Trying to think what else I could tell you about it. Questions?
I would,
Nan, go
Oh,
ahead.
okay, I don't really have a question. I just want to say that's fantastic, and thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to commend Lee. You're going to be hearing more from Lee and us this year about learning spaces and design. And that's something we're really going to focus on in our spaces and how we can have them be culturally responsive to our young people. And this is a perfect example. While we couldn't have a lot of educators come tonight because it's summer and young people, we did want you to know that the work is ongoing. And this was an outstanding example.
Thanks.
I can't believe we dragged you out of the Rose Garden this summer to come to me, but thank you for coming.
And teachers now are talking about using the space as an outdoor classroom.
Sure.
The one thing we've learned about learning spaces, when we started with the work, 5 years ago?
5 years ago now, yeah.
We created this incredible classroom, and it's been used on a pretty regular basis up into it. But I realized we had created the classroom, and then, with that idea of, if you build it, they'll come. And I realized along the way, I don't know why it takes me so long, that instead of building it for others, we have to have everybody build it. So what I was proposing this spring, and we're hoping to get off the ground in terms of the learning spaces, is having teachers work with students in designing the learning spaces themselves. Kids know what they need, and that increases that whole engagement and empowerment and metacognition. I was thinking that we can head out to Danby, where we have a pile of stuff sitting there, and we can have kids and teachers take a look at that stuff and repurpose it, redesign it, take the legs off things, cut them apart. So we're not looking at a huge investment of money in the capital improvements. We've got some folks in various buildings that are interested, so that should take off. There was a sale at Ithaca College this past week. I don't know if any of you saw it, kind of like a garage sale. They were selling old furniture and equipment. Mary from Caroline gave each of her teachers money to transform their learning spaces, and there were a bunch of Caroline teachers waiting online at 7 o'clock in the morning to scarf up stuff to transform their classroom spaces.
No, not surprised. That's what outstanding leadership does.
So check out the garden, and if you have any questions, let me know. I'll be getting a plant list up, so if you want to know what's there, I can fill you in.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate all of you and what you do.
But thanks, Lee. Go ahead, Chris.
My only question is that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. The pondering Dr. Brown.
It's a learning space.
Oh, one
It's a
thing
tranquil space.
what I wanted to mention, I forgot. If you notice the locust logs there,
Yeah.
my son and I brought those in, and they're placed intentionally. There's the sitting log on each of the corners. That's to prevent people from cutting across and walking through the
Exactly.
flowers.
No, exactly.
But meanwhile, it looks like a nice spot to sit, and folks do sit. The other logs are set up, some of them in a chevron, in a V, and you might wonder why that is. They're positioned for the emergency exits from the windows, so that when kids need to get out of the building, hopefully that doesn't happen, they can get out and there's a clear walkway where they can get through without any problems at all. So it's a design element that is also functional. And those logs over time will rot down and add more habitat for different critters. We already have some garter snakes living there.
Go ahead.
What about maintenance? What maintenance is going to be required, and who's going to do it?
So the only maintenance that this garden will need over time will be cutting down the perennials in probably March. And once kids and teachers are using this as a classroom, there'll be the investment. We're going to be registering this site on Project Yard Map through the Lab of Ornithology, and kids will be gathering data as part of a citizen science project.
And we've for a long time, and Paul knows I hate weeds and drive me crazy, and but for a long time we were trying to get Ithaca High beautified more. There's a lot of spaces at Ithaca High, a lot of courtyards, and it was how can we get students to to take ownership, because it was always, well, who's going to maintain it, who's going to weed it, if we do plantings, what's going to happen to it. So it's key when, well, that's my plot. I mean, I planted that, and so there always has to be that student involvement or that ownership. Someone has to
Talk
take.
to Jason about that, in terms of this coming year, if you want to look at the high school as another site.
Oh, no, definitely. This goes way back. I had a conversation with the previous superintendent, and we were looking at this space, and and she mentioned how for this building, it brought some peace and how green spaces do that, and so I kind of mentioned, well, if it's good for this building, how come when I walk through the entrance at the high school, I'm looking at weeds, and so there has to be a connection there. Superintendent on the entire building, and it is that entryway. It is that, what is that feeling when you go in? So this space had more value than the entry to Ithaca High School. Well, I probably thought that Ithaca High School's entryway probably had more value because more students would see that. And how do you start your day? And so I'm more than happy to keep pushing to cut down sumac, Paul. And,
There are ornamental sumacs that are beautiful. There's one
there's
called Tiger's Eyes.
right, ornamental sumac, not weed sumac that's 15 feet tall, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, but it's great job.
Thank you.
Outstanding.
One other piece, the lavender garden out here that you walk past, it was my students 30 years ago that built the retaining walls, the stairs, and the paths that go through that. And, they still talk about those experiences. That's what they remember.
Outstanding.
Okay.
Great work.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And thank you for that, Dr. Brown. Anything else, Dr. Brown?
That's it for me tonight.
Your picture just continues to be up there all the time.
It's a good one.
The thinker. That's you're one of 6,000. Is that what I told Dr. Brown? All right. So we're going to spend 2 seconds on the annual convention authorization, the NISBA. Jennifer, what do we have to do?
The motion to approve it, but I don't, I think there were some people that were still pondering having their name added.
We can approve those names if they still have questions, correct? And they can decide later to register. Yeah.
Oh, there's 2 people listed. Oh, my name's there, so.
Who's
So
running?
you can add your name.
I'll move to approve attendance at the NISBA convention by Myra Lang and Rob Ainsley and who else?
Ann Reichman.
And who else? You said there were still 2
Did
ponds.
Sean respond?
Nicole was considering
And
it.
Nicole.
You can put my name in. And I apologize, Brad, you had said you thought you could only go Thursday night.
Yeah, don't put me down.
Can we?
Yeah, it's not I do want to point out, it is not, it is
Oh,
not in New York
so
City.
go ahead, put me down.
Yeah, we got him and Sean, because
So-
inevitably we're going to be asked to do something.
Yeah, it's not,
Okay,
They can work around schedules.
all right.
Rob, I apologize for speaking the meeting, but I noticed last year that there was an identified voting delegate and an alternate voting delegate
Right,
of the
we need
group.
to.
that is something that.
Yeah, I'll add to the motion that Myra Lang be the designated voting delegate for the Ithaca City School District.
Congratulations on this.
Right.
Doing exception training.
And Nicole as the alternate voting delegate.
Thank you, Brad. Does that have to be seconded?
Should be
I'll
second.
second.
Second by Pat, thank you. So, are we good?
We're good.
Are those 2 motions?
No, that's one I added on.
Okay, we added
Before we
on.
second.
Amended, very good, thank you. All in favor? That's everyone. All right, good.
Myra, I'll talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah, so David Hand is here, yes. We're merging with another district, Dave.
Come on up, David.
Athletically, if not emotionally, and any other way.
Yeah, so the deadline is not till October 1st for mergers for hockey, but the parents and students are really in need of just answers, just to make sure that they can move forward, and we're trying to give as much support as we can to the young girls, the ladies hockey, the hockey program, and this is in part a way to do that, just for them to know that those that are external to the program or to our district, that they can and will be a part of the team. So as it stands right now, there are 20 girls overall that have expressed interest to be on our roster, 13 of which are Ithaca players, 7 of which come from 4 other districts. You have the kind of positions outlined in front of you, so this numbers that I was comfortable with. That's why I put it for you.
And a reminder, they provide their own transportation to and from practices and all of that. We're not providing that for the kids from outside of the district.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, I'll move the motion to approve the merger with Dryden, Newfield, Lansing, and UE for, I can't believe I'm saying UE, for girls varsity ice hockey.
Second.
Second by Chris, I heard Chris first, and and David, a team of 13 of this guy,
Would be
the ladies
thin.
would be
You could field the team.
It'd be more healthy than it was
problematic
last year.
as the season goes on.
But you always have somebody injured,
Right.
kids with the flu, whatever.
Exactly.
13 would be kind of a minimal.
Exactly.
You couldn't field it, but it would be tough.
Even 19 to 20 is less than what our coaches would want, but that's healthy.
Yeah, that's a good sense.
So it helps us, yes.
And right, playing time typically is not an issue because everyone rotates in. Of course, it's always the goalie position always seems to be the bugaboo, but I'm certainly
Yes,
all
I
for
was
it.
going to ask if there would be any controversy about the goalie position.
I didn't, it wasn't a problem from my vantage point. We have one person that's on the team currently that only plays goalie. There's one transfer or one that wants to merge with us that is a goalie, but she does play other positions. And then the second one we have that's an Ithaca player. She plays 3 positions, so she's a defender, forward, and a goalie. So that's not her primary. So I think goalie adding to us gives us depth. Is my opinion.
So,
we're all good.
4 forward lines, 3 D pairs, 2 goalies. That's a team.
Exactly.
Wow. From the hockey people, and Jennifer, we're not even going to ask Jennifer about it. All in favor? Great. That's everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
And now on to water.
At our last facilities meeting, you had asked for an update, but since we don't have
Come right up,
facilities,
gentlemen.
at this point,
we need to be close.
I've asked Labella Engineering to come and give us an update on our water situation and the work that they have done. I would like to thank Paul Alexander and his 2 plumbers who have been side by side with Labella doing a lot of the work and the testing. I also want to thank Paul and the men and women of his crew who have been moving hundreds and hundreds of 5-gallon water bottles throughout our 13 buildings. It is pretty incredible the amount of work that's going on to supply water to the children of Ithaca City Schools. And what Paul and his team are doing has been almost seamless. They're still doing all the work that they've been doing, and then they add these hundreds and hundreds of bottles. Not only that, but also the towers that are being used to distribute the water. Finally, Paul, myself, Labella, the County Health Department, the State Health Department, and the EPA are meeting weekly. We do a conference call every week discussing what is needing to be done for the Ithaca City School District. Labella's been with us since May, and it was a very slow process at the beginning, trying to get through, and I know they're going to share this with you, so I don't want to steal too much of your thunder, but going through the process of what the County Health Department and the EPA is asking us. Remember, we have 2 buildings that have wells, and then the other 11 buildings that are municipal water sources. I would like to introduce Greg Senecal, Senior Vice President, and also Clement Chung, our Project Manager, and I forgot one other thing. In thanking Paul, I forgot to say happy birthday, because today is Paul's birthday.
Happy birthday.
Well, on that note.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you very much to the board for giving us this opportunity to give you an update on the work that we've been doing. As Paul mentioned, that there has been a lot of work that's been going on, and I wanted to kind of keep this relatively straightforward and give you an opportunity to ask questions of us afterwards. So I just have a couple of slides. The first one is just an update of where the work that we've been doing so far. It's kind of broken down into 4 tasks on the left-hand side there. So I'll go straight into it. The first task that we completed was the development of a QA/QC plan for the actions that we were going to do to identify the areas that were contaminated or had issues with lead contamination. The first part of that was evaluating this, the multiple rounds of sampling that had occurred in the district up until this point, up until the end of March. There were multiple sampling events, and we were able to find that only really the March sampling events, there were 2, one performed by the County Health Department and one performed by the district themselves, that were actually corroborated to follow the protocol in what's called the EPA 3T's technical guidance. Now, that technical guidance document is basically the standard for evaluating and testing schools across the country in terms of identifying where the potential sources for lead contamination could be within the plumbing system. So the other issue that comes into play here is that the health department in Tompkins County is actually somewhat unique in that Tompkins County Sanitary Code gives them regulatory authority that other county health departments don't have across the state. And we checked with the state health department, and they said that this is pretty unique for this county. What this means for the school district is that they have approval authority that's granted under this clause in the code for basically any corrections that they see might be necessary to address public health concerns in the water system for any water supplier. So that includes looking at what we're calling the plumbing profiles, the flushing, sampling, and the remediation plans. So that's something that I wanted to bring to your attention, because that has been a very long process. Every time that we propose a method to do sampling or flushing or any investigations that we're looking at, remedial solutions, that has to be reviewed and approved by the health department.
And I want to interject just briefly. David started out when he introduced us saying, hey, we got started very slowly. And Clem just described a long process to you. We know you're in a hurry. I get the sense that David views this project as a house, and he wants to see the house up and the paint on the walls and the windows in. And I know you do too, and I understand that. The process that we've had to go through in the first couple of months is basically laying a sound foundation under that house. So when we perform the sampling, when we make recommendations, we can go back, because the EPA is watching very closely. Your situation generated a lot of media attention. I know it got Senator Schumer's attention. He's directed the EPA, help Ithaca. We know it got New York State's attention. They've directed the State Health Department, keep a close eye on Ithaca. So this foundation is necessary, and it's painful to go through. No one can speak to that more than Clem and the rest of our team. But what I would rather, and feel free to ask questions, I would rather have it done right, so you don't get more letters like the March 22nd letter saying, you went out, you sampled, the results aren't valid. What Clem's describing is a 100-page document, a very technical document that establishes protocols that we're using when we sample, protocols that we're using to flush your plumbing system. It allows all of these agencies to trace back the course of the water through every single building from every single water fountain. And it does seem a little overbearing, and it took time to get through. But now that we have that done, and we are done with that, all of our sampling will be defensible. You will not get any letters back saying, you didn't do this right, your results aren't valid, you can't prove that you're protecting your student body, etc. So I just wanted to So yes, the process took a while, but it's now done and documented correctly to the laws, or not laws, the regulations and programs of July 2016.
And these are the same, whether it's a system we operate off a well or whether it's public water.
Correct.
I mean, the process,
Because
it's a question, it's the
yes,
same.
because of Tompkins County.
That is correct.
Sorry, but that, it's the
Yes.
same with a question mark after it.
No, it is the same.
Okay.
And is that protocol for testing, did you then retest based on this new protocol?
We just finished the protocol, and we don't have full approval yet from the health department. David's pushing them very, very hard. There are, there's 6 to 8 different components. There's a quality assurance, quality control plan. There's a QAP, that's a separate quality assurance plan required by the US EPA. There are the full plumbing profiles. There are descriptions of the flushing methodology. I mean, we are talking everything from volumes that get flushed through each and every school, right down to the actual flow rates that are used to collect the samples, the sample containers, the head space that is left above the water.
But Ann, we are testing now.
We
Right, so I'm just trying to figure out, so that what you're basically trying to do is make an accurate, verifiable, repeatable
procedure.
sample.
Yes.
Right. As of right now, the only sampling that follows that protocol that's been done has been limited sampling at Caroline and Enfield. And those were the 2 schools that were identified first because those are the schools which the school districts are actually regulated under federal regulations
And
as the
was
water
that
supplier.
protocol, because I know there's so many different, there's the EPA and there's the county, so is that protocol closer to what the county was doing to begin with, or the EPA was doing, or
So
the BOCES was doing?
Or no one.
Or no one, yeah.
So based upon our review of the methodologies that we use for the sampling, like I say, that was the only set of samples that followed the national guidance document that was prepared by the EPA. The other sampling events that had occurred, some of them were still valid sampling events, but they were taken for a different purpose. So for example, at Caroline and Enfield, you have additional regulations, federal and state regulations that you have to abide by. And the sampling that was done in in August of last year and in January of this year, those were in order to comply with those regulations. The sampling procedures that we're looking at now, they are by and large voluntary guidelines that are prepared by the EPA, but New York State has just passed legislation to say that all school districts are going to adopt those guidelines, that technical guidance, moving forward to say you shall be testing your water to these standards. The only difference is there's a slight difference to what they call the action level, basically the threshold of the results that you start to take remedial actions.
Letty.
I was going to ask, that seems like, of course, when you get people of the magnitude of senators involved, we should be at least trying to set a precedent, straighten some things out that were crooked in this process. To follow up on Ann's point, what I still am not clear on myself is, we didn't just have a technical issue. We had an abundance of different municipalities and agencies all trying to figure out who was to do what, to what standards, and who will ultimately take responsibility for those results. So even if the state says this has to be done, I'm not clear, given what I saw happen here, that we're still going to figure out who that means. Will it be us? Will it be BOCES? Will it be the county health department?
Who's going to carry it out?
Who carries the water, quote unquote, right? We were all a little shocked at how Byzantine, or maybe missing entirely, those pathways questions were, much less the technical aspect, which you seem to be trying to help everyone resolve here. And I'm not even sure that's a question you can answer, but it's something that occurs to me that although we're taking this extraordinary effort to do this time, because now we're on everybody's radar, we have the same issue 2 years from now.
And that's what we're trying to help you avoid in terms of collaborating with the health department and the EPA to make sure that we all understand that whatever procedures we put into place and moving forward, whatever monitoring procedures come out of this, that is in agreement with the direction that they are going with that. But you're right, I mean, there are certain things that are fluid. As of right now, that legislation hasn't been turned into regulation, so we are still in a pattern where we would need to know what that regulation is now. All indications, having spoken with state health departments, that we are doing things the way that they intend to move forward. But until that gets signed off, that is always going to be a question.
And are we hopeful that the Tompkins County Health Department is going to adopt this procedure as their procedure?
Absolutely, they
Their
actually,
procedure, not ours.
they actually have adopted several of the things that we have put forward, and we have done some testing because they've approved us moving forward with the testing, and that's why it's taken so long.
Okay.
You say you've done testing at Enfield and Carolyn?
No, that, historically, we've done that.
No, I'm talking,
Most
The new
recently.
procedure.
you've gone through the protocols, you have your new protocols, which may or may not have been all approved by the county, correct?
So the county is looking at this building by building. So the two buildings that we have tested under the new protocol have been the Ithaca High School buildings A and Q and the Boynton Middle School. And there were specific reasons why those two schools were selected. For the high school, buildings A and Q are your most recently renovated buildings or expanded buildings. So all construction within those buildings should be in accordance with, all of the materials are certified to be lead-free, for example. There's a level of confidence that the construction meets current standards, and therefore there should be a higher expectation that the lead levels should be lower in those buildings. So that was one reason. The reason why we selected Boynton Middle School is that there are some fixtures in there. For example, they have a bottle filling station that's an extension of one of the drinking fountains, which again was recently installed, and that is a potential solution that we're looking at moving forward if some of the older fixtures can't be remediated, or some of the older plumbing can't be remediated in some of the older buildings. So we're looking at it in terms of not just testing to find out what the results are, we're also looking at it in terms of testing to figure out what the right solution is. And each building is somewhat separate. Each building has to be looked at based on where the water comes from, what the age of the building is, what the age of the plumbing is, what the arrangement of the piping is. All of those factors come into addressing this on a building-by-building basis, and that's why the health department has been looking to approve our flushing sampling plans on a building-by-building basis.
And are your A and Q building tests going to be impacted by the problems the city's having with their water system?
That is something that we're looking at and monitoring closely. They did provide some information as to what is currently in the water distribution system right now. We'll be monitoring that to see whether that does have an effect. We also tested at Boynton, though, which is on the Bolton Point water system. So that's why our next, in the course of action for the next school that we've been looking at, we're actually going to be looking at Northeast Elementary School, because that's also on the Bolton Point system. So when we look at the results from that, it won't necessarily be affected by the information that, any temporary changes that the city of Ithaca is making to their water system.
Northeast was not our next testing site. I think it was
Belsham and Annex.
but we decided to go to Northeast because of Bolton Point. But because we've done all of this work ahead of time, to shift to Northeast is going to take us a few days instead of a few weeks. To give you a little bit of a history, I went to Clem about 6 or 8 weeks ago. I want to say about 6 weeks ago, and I said, wait a minute, we've got new buildings. And because I don't totally know everything, thank you so much for allowing us to have an engineering firm, because I remember when we were at facilities and you were like, do what you do and let's get somebody in here. I said to them, I said, well, wait a minute, these buildings are brand new, and the county health department says, yes, but how are they connected? Where is that water coming from? Because you might have a new fixture that's being fed by a 1964 water line. So it took us time to get through that whole process.
Right to the main.
Right. So we finally did test last week, and we're waiting for the results, but unfortunately, school districts are testing throughout the state now, so the timeline for our testing results is much longer than it was back in January.
Define much longer.
So we're looking at 3 to 4 weeks on average for sampling results. Usually they come back in around about 2 weeks.
How are you analyzing the plumbing at this point? Like, what process are you using to kind of find out if it's the plumbing, the fixture, the pipes?
So that's, sorry,
Go ahead.
so that's really the 3T's guidance document, the EPA guidance document, is supposed to help you ascertain where within the plumbing system those potential lead sources are. So we know that there are certain ages of equipment, whether it's water coolers, faucets themselves. We know that going back a certain time, say before 1986, lead solder was allowed to use to join copper pipes. So there's an understanding of the history of how plumbing systems have been put together and where the risk factors might be. The procedure for testing looks at where the locations are for the outlets. And the typical sampling event would take a sample of water at the fixture itself. So the idea is that if you let the water sit for a certain period of time, if it's corrosive, it will leach out any materials into that water. And if the water's not moving, where that sample is taken from is representative of where in the plumbing that is. So what we call the first draw is that first connection to the fixture. We also take a flush sample, which is some period of time afterwards, whereby we let the water flow out of the faucet or outlet in a laminar way, and that shows it's a good approximation of that portion of water, that slug of water has come from somewhere else in the plumbing system. So where we might not have the ability to actually go and tear down a wall and physically look at a pipe, for example, that's in the wall, having the lead results gives us having a test result that we can identify comes from a certain particular location within the system gives us a better indication of whether there is a lead-bearing material substance within that system, within that location.
I'm looking at, really, how many different variables can you introduce into an analysis and ever hope to get any concrete results for us to make any decisions on what to do, where, when,
I think
and how?
what you're saying is, where are we headed? But, at
Well,
some point, there's got to be an end point here, that we are either going to fix it, or we're going to turn it off forever.
Right.
There's so many different buildings built at different times, and whether the moon is out or the sun is shining, that the fact is going to affect the lead level in water somewhere. I don't know, there's so many different variables. I'm not even sure how you can, perhaps you can explain how are you going to get to the point where I understand there's protocols and you develop that, but testing on any day can be different than the day before. And so please go ahead.
I tend to sometimes talk too much and it gets me in trouble, but so be it. Two different scenarios that we think that we have here. Caroline and Enfield are sort of a separate entity from the rest of the schools. With Caroline and Enfield, we've done preliminary water quality testing of the wells themselves. The wells don't contain lead. Right. That's good news. What we have done at other school districts and from literature review, rather than trying to isolate in those two schools where we have really decent control over the water coming into the plumbing system. And we've also done some X-ray fluorescence testing of whether you call it scale, particulate, sediment, solids within those systems. We've discovered through preliminary testing with a handheld X-ray fluorescence gun that there is some lead in this sediment that's flaking off the inside of the pipes. The data which is coming back, we have the preliminary data back. We also have that data in with a company called Caris Corporation. They are a water adjustment, water chemical, well-respected company from Chicago who's doing a workup for us right now. Because we know it's in those two systems and you control the water. We are, do I dare go this far, looking at an orthophosphate system which essentially coats the inside of the pipe by adjusting water quality parameters via, again, more chemicals,
But is that a similar system to what the city water already uses?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
But we can,
Right, the city's adding additives to try to deal with their
It's the
issue right
same
now.
we're dealing with
phosphates.
thousands of gallons at Caroline and Enfield for each school where they're dealing with millions. So it's much easier to control. We are in the process of doing that right now. We should have you work up, I think, before the end of the week. We have the data back. We don't have the recipe for the additive.
And how long does water have to run through that system with that added to it before you feel you can test and hope to have changed results?
The other part of that is it would take a long time to run through the system.
Yeah, I thought
So
that
you
was
want to do a pilot test or a bench scale test first, where you're using a fixture that's known to have failed several times. The piping, a short run of piping that's associated with that fixture. And you are introducing, it's basically, whether it's orthophosphate or calcium carbonate, you're creating a slight film on the inside of the pipe that prevents the water from leaching the lead out.
And once that's in place, is it permanent, or do you have to keep,
No, unfortunately.
That's what Detroit did, was they stopped doing it.
Right.
Or not Detroit, Flint. They stopped doing it.
so that
The
coating,
new water came in,
it sort of,
stripped it out.
They also switched here.
So that is,
They
the
were
coating
already-
can be stripped out by introduction of a new water or a change of the
Correct.
waters.
Correct.
Something would happen, so you have to constantly.
okay, now people worry about things that get added to water and, around, is there any, this particular thing that you would add to the water, is there any downside if you added that, and that somebody's like, how come you're adding that to the water? Is that its own toxin? Probably not.
Well, you're drinking it already,
Oh,
because you're in
okay.
the city.
All right,
You're already drinking it.
You're-
Just,
Well, if you're drinking whatever's coming out.
And instead of using the chemical terms, think of it as lime.
Oh,
You
okay.
add lime to a farm field to adjust
That's
pH.
that.
It's calcium carbonate.
Okay.
But again, I know I just got into chemical danger there.
But I would point out, I mean,
You have to
you're not going to get into trouble by being open and having an open conversation with us about what you're saying, what we're up
we're just trying
against.
to understand.
Right, and so never feel like I shouldn't share this, because it's far better for us to have a conversation about it. And we're having conversations with the community right now because you're on tape. So I think, I mean, all our meetings are on tape.
We're actually on live,
So,
but more people watch it later.
But, this is what, we're just looking for solutions, looking for where are we now, so, yeah.
We're in a place better than many school districts because we do have water in our buildings, and we're going to continue to do these idealistic water systems and test it and then retest it, and maybe if it's working 6 weeks later, make sure it's still working, and we'll supply this water until we all feel, and we bring to you, and we feel safe that it's okay to do this
Right, I mean,
futuristically.
right, the city water coming into BJM, do we have a separate system that, a main that coming into BJM is then treated and then for that building? Is that
That's
right?
what you're doing. I appreciate your openness and transparency. So since you're doing that, I'm going to ask another question. That potential solution you mentioned, and I'm no expert, although people keep calling me as if I am one. That solution is one potential solution, but there are others. And that one solution isn't one that's preferred by many folks because they will be hearing a lot more about it. The folks I talk to and the folks that call me refer to that solution as a secondary or third option. So
For corrosion control?
yes.
So this is specifically looking at Caroline and Enfield, where you are the water supplier to those schools. So that is a...
Right, so let me be clear with my question.
Right.
What other options are we looking at? I mean, that one is one, but if you listen to a lot of folks, they are preferring that one. So do you have other things you're thinking about?
So for Caroline and Enfield, source water treatment is, whether it's orthophosphate or lime, there's different chemicals that you can use to reduce the corrosivity of the water or coat the piping to help reduce the lead leaching into the water. Where you have the rest of your schools, they are supplied by either the City of Ithaca and or Welcome Point. A lot of the other school districts that we're familiar with, they're in a similar situation where they purchase the water wholesale from the supplier, and then they distribute it to their customers. For example, what they did in Brighton School District in Monroe County was that they did the 3Ts testing, they analyzed and identified which outlets were high lead, had high lead. They then replaced those fixtures, tested them again. If they came back again high lead, then they applied Brita, like faucet-mounted Brita filters to them. Tested again. If that didn't work, then they shut off the faucets permanently and said, this is our solution, is these, we only have a handful that are in question, and if we can't find a solution to it through these different mechanisms, then we shut them off. I don't believe that they looked at corrosion control in terms of adding a chemical system, but there are other school districts that are municipal water that have. So for example, the Hilton School District, they have a corrosion control system on their on some of their schools. So it varies. Different schools have tried different options. Some of them work for some schools, some of them don't. Our plan coming into this project for the municipal schools was to kind of follow that, looking at where are the, first of all, how many affected outlets do you have, how many affected fixtures do you have, and then assessing it from there. Is it a localized issue at a handful of fixtures, or is it a system-wide issue? If it's a system-wide issue, then we have to kind of look at source water treatment. And that, like you say, would be kind of a second or third option, because obviously there's an ongoing expense related to operation and maintenance or something like that, as opposed to just changing out the fixture.
So in the buildings where we only had a handful, we're going to look at the fixtures.
And I'm not sure that we answered your question.
You did, but
I think you were going directly at filtration versus pipe replacement versus pipe lining.
Yeah, what I thought may happen, because we're on TV, folks may take away that there's one solution that we're going to look
No, there are many.
And I want to hear, like we do with everything else in our schools, it's a differentiated approach no matter what we find or learn. It's going to be a one form approach, solution to all this.
Yes, and again, we have all the backup now.
Sure.
All of our backup is ready. We can sample at will within a few days' notice to the health department for approvals for the schools. Clem just mentioned the fixture replacement in all of the schools that are on public water supply versus Caroline and Enfield. But as we begin to get answers and solutions, then what we typically do, and we'd like to do with you, is present a risk, cost, benefit analysis. You know, what is a sure thing, what does it cost, and how much does it reduce the risk for the students, and go in that type of fashion.
Can I ask another question since I'm on the roll? Hypothetically, because I'm the one getting the question, folks, if our community decides it wants 0 parts per billion as a standard, help me understand what I respond to that, knowing that everything I'm reading speaks to that is impossible. And we just put it out there now.
Oh gosh, Dr. Brown, it's a difficult question.
I've been wanting to have an answer, so I'm glad that one number is on now.
Whether 0 parts per billion is achievable, I don't know that it is. And what you then, you have to begin to look at the exacting water quality of the water that's being supplied by the city in Bolton Point. Obviously, if their number is not 0, you're going to have a real hard time over the long term achieving 0. Can it be done? Yes, but it would require several, I don't know.
I don't know if we could ever say that you could achieve 0, because a lot of your piping, a lot of your fixtures, they are allowed to have a certain percentage of lead in them that's above 0. There's also the factor of when you analyze the water, the equipment that's used to analyze it has a detection limit, and that detection limit for lead is not 0. So even if you were aiming to get there, you wouldn't be able to record that you achieved that.
the question each one of us is going to have to answer in small spaces and large.
Sure.
And I appreciate you struggling with it.
It's not an easy question to answer.
Right, we've had the conversation with some folks, certainly at Carolina and Enfield, that we as a board, district administrative team, it would not be up to us to make that determination. When you talked about the cost benefit analysis, risk benefit analysis, we will be sharing that conversation with the community, and the community is going to have to weigh in. And is zero, I'm not even sure this has zero lead in it, frankly, but is zero what the community wants? Then we'll have to figure that out, that we will have bottled water for students and forever, basically. But what is that number, and that we have to come up with for that risk and cost benefit analysis, which is great to do a cost benefit analysis, but when you're talking with parents with young kids, well, how much lead do you want your child to have at school? And so that's a tough conversation. So that's why you guys are hired on to figure all this out and help us through this cost benefit analysis and manage the risk, and we'll be working on this for a while.
And that's an interesting question, Dr. Brown. If zero is the answer, we could probably stop now and just provide bottled water forever. I mean, if that's the answer, I mean, because you can look at the data on both Bolton Point and the city, and they don't report zero. They report low, but they don't report zero.
That's why tonight, like every other chance we get to be in front of folks, is an education.
And while the city's putting orthophosphate in the water, I don't believe Bolton Point is. But right now, Bolton Point's providing a quarter of the water for the city. With the drought and the change in their system, I understand more than 1 million gallons a day is going from Bolton Point over to the city. And it's also tied into Cornell's system, just if you want to complicate it a little more.
Cornell
The
is
city,
separate.
Cornell, and Bolton Point are actually all tied together. So if you want to complicate it even more.
It's a very good question. It's really, really hard to answer. You can certainly get, and again, it's a matter of cost and effort. And you can certainly introduce. You can control everything. You can Brita filter everything. You need to really pay attention to the burn-through rate on the filters when the filters become less than 98% efficient. Yet you have to, and the public has to ask the question, how much lead is in Cayuga Lake? How much lead is in the sediment in the creeks from the Ithaca gun factory? Which are hazardous waste levels of lead, which leach into that creek and enter Cayuga Lake, and how much lead is acceptable in the pipes in the community, because, believe me, it's there. I know I'm not doing you much good. No. I'm just,
It's reality. Yeah.
We need a baseline for each building. We need to know what we have, what we're dealing with. Certainly we had enough meetings, met with community members throughout the district, and one concern certainly was there was 3 hot sites in a building through one round of testing, and the others were fine, or quote unquote okay. Do another round of testing. Well, okay, now there's hot sources over there, so we go through the process of okay, this one faucet, this one dribbler fountain is hot, so we're going to shut that down. But I think it would be hard to convince everyone that okay, that solved the problem in that wing, that building, because I think that's probably.
And in one case, we actually changed out the bubbler, and we changed
Exactly.
out the piping to the bubbler, and it still came up high, and if not mistaken, higher the next time that we tested.
Well, you disturb the system.
Yes.
David, you can't disturb the system because then
You turn that old valve.
The other thing is, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, we were talking about filtration and the filters. Could you just elaborate a little bit on what a filtration system would look like? I mean, I don't need a lot of detail, but just in general.
So it depends, on the type of fixture. For example, I'm sure you've seen there are household units that you can purchase that
Yep.
attach to the kitchen faucet, for example. That would be an example. In some of the water coolers, the manufacturers allow a space for a filter to be installed inside the unit itself. So it's a similar kind of concept.
And those take the lead out?
Takes it down to a certain level. I'm not sure exactly what they would guarantee that it takes it down to.
But like a filter, you'd have to change it like once a month, once a week, once a
Whatever the
day?
manufacturer's recommendations would be for that.
So we did test the filter at Boynton, which is I think it was a Brita filter. It's one of the bottle fillers that was
Okay.
donated. And that was one of the things I wanted to test, these 3 systems. One was AQ and that bottle filler to see what that tells us. Is it 0? Is it, and it usually comes back less than 1. It never says 0 to us, it just says less than 1. That's, in my opinion, what comes close to 0. We've never gotten a 0 reading.
Well, your point was,
The testing.
It was, yeah,
that's as good as it gets.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm curious to see what that does, and then we also, Paul talked to Scott today over at Boynton. He says, how often do you change the filter? How often do you need to? And he says, well, there's a system that shows green light, yellow light, red light, and we're gonna look more into that. Paul and I did meet with a company before Labella even came on to say, what would it cost to change every water fountain into a Brita water fountain or similar? It doesn't have to be Brita because that's a name brand.
Right, right.
And we started to look at that and see what that means to us, but more important, not only what it would cost to change out the water fountains, but what it would cost to put the filters in, and would it be more prudent to do that or just to supply the water for eternity?
That's part of your analysis, I would think, right?
Yes, and that's actually fairly easy for us to start costing out. Once we obtain costs, for example, for Caroline and Enfield, for the orthophosphate system or potentially a lime system, we'd like to give you a sure thing first and then back away from that sure thing with the other cost options for calcium carbonate, lime versus orthophosphate. We coming up, getting the cost from a supplier for filters, and you have to understand that how often the filters need to be changed, what the program is. When we're working on hazardous waste sites, there's a burn through time for filters now. And how safe is safe? Do you change the filter at 50% of the burn time, 70%? That's kind of uncharted territory when you're talking about public water supplies. 5 years from now, it may be very well, there may be protocols, but you would have to establish that. But it's fairly easy to put those costs together.
And what's your time frame for because it sounds like a lot of detective work involved in this, and how do you see, how long would it take to figure all this out for the 2 buildings like Caroline and Enfield?
Timeline for.
Yeah.
Those buildings, like you said, we've gotten the first set of results back on the source water, so knowing that that's one solution, we're looking at that in addition to looking at, potentially another type of corrosion control solution.
The bench test, that's gonna be, I'm gonna let you answer.
It'll depend if we decide to bench test or pilot study. We're waiting for some more information from the chemical supplier to say, what dosing rate would we need to do this to achieve a certain level, of confidence on reducing the corrosion potential. So once we get that information back, it will indicate to us whether doing a pilot study in the school or doing a bench scale test is an applicable way of analyzing and ensuring that with the actual fixtures and the actual plumbing in your school, that this chemical is going to do what the supplier says it's going to do.
We danced around your time question.
It's difficult to know to
Is 60 days fair?
I would say, yeah.
For just for Caroline and Enfield?
For Caroline and
The bench test.
right.
Yeah.
Where we're looking at chemical corrosion control as a solution.
You need to give it time to build up the coating.
And then, say you come up and say, well, I really want to do this corrosion control, I really think that's going to be the best. That, if I understand what you said in the first part, you then need to get that approved by Tompkins County Health Department then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Those 2 schools, again, they are regulated under federal regulations, so they would have
You should
to
explain it.
Sure. So the lead and copper rule is the federal regulation that applies to all water systems that provide water, and the school district is considered a public water supply for Carroll and Enfield because they're on wells. So those regulations, under those regulations, it spells out, these are the processes you have to go through to test, and then look at different types of corrosion control as a solution. The other solution would be to replace the plumbing aspect of it. The interesting thing about the lead and copper rule is that that rule was really written around whole community systems and not specifically buildings like schools, for example. So they're applying a rule that was written for a community system, which includes, for example, lead service pipes, which is what you've heard is happening in Flint, for example, where there's a pipe that's actually made of lead connecting the water main to the house.
Sure.
And the rule kind of specifies how many of those pipes you have to replace within a certain time frame while you exceed the threshold in the testing. So how that applies to schools is a little bit murkier because the schools generally do not have lead pipes. Most of the plumbing is not made of lead. So what you're looking at really is, like I said before, fixtures that have a certain brass alloy that has a certain percentage of lead in it, lead solder that was used to join the copper pipes, those kind of things. So to satisfy those conditions, we think that corrosion control treatment is probably the best way to, based on the data that we've seen so far, which is not comprehensive. But we understand that there's a system-wide issue in both of those schools. So we know that it's related to the corrosivity of the water, so what we can do is change that and see what effect that has across the board. For your municipal schools, where if we test them and we find there's only a handful of fixtures, because we understand that the city is supplying orthophosphate, a corrosion control chemical anyway, and that's supposed to be passivating the leaching potential of the water, then your solution there would be maybe to just replace those fixtures and see whether that, again, as I mentioned before, whether that replacing it with quote-unquote lead-free fixtures reduces the lead to an acceptable level.
And that will happen. I think you'll be pleased with how quickly that happens. Now, we do have this Tompkins County Health Department variable, but with other school districts, from the time we've sampled, gotten the results, switched out the fixtures, 50 days. And then, but you do have to give the fixture time to, I call it assimilate. Passivate, that's Clem's term.
And there are several fixtures throughout our 13 buildings or more, if you think about this building also, that are original to the building. And we know for sure that those are ones that would need to be changed. I am correct there. Yes, because if they didn't break, we didn't replace them. So there are some really old water fountains.
Sure.
And those must go, because we know those have so many aspects of lead within them. So we need to look at that as we're looking at replacements.
Again, the sampling plans are all the EPA, the EPA, the health department, the Tompkins County Health, the state health, are all say we've addressed concerns, right, and comments.
Mm-hmm.
All of that is over as of only a few days ago, and now we can get the data.
Do you have more for us tonight, or you've probably said more than you want to, but do you want to address a few more slides?
I think we touched upon a lot of that in our discussions, and like I said, we wanted to give you an opportunity to ask us questions because we know that you
we will certainly take that opportunity, and it's, we made that clear to, and David knows that it would be a conversation, and we'll continue to have conversations.
We'll look for an update at what, the facilities in August?
Yep.
Okay.
And just to be clear, you mentioned a pilot program at Carolina or Enfield, or, I mean, that would be coming up when, you're still looking at a 60-day window, then perhaps doing pilots at one of those two schools, or both?
as soon as we get a recommendation for the specific chemical that the supplier would look to use, then we would look to start.
Right. So, the pilot program was mentioned, so I just wanted to make that clear for the record that that may happen, but not happening anytime soon, not in the next few months. It would be.
Well, it would start in the next couple of weeks, I would say.
Okay.
But it may take some time to get the results back to prove.
Right, the results are one thing, but when you started this pilot, I was looking for the start date. So perhaps in the next few weeks it may start. Okay, all right.
Yeah, I went after the folks pretty hard last night. We should be getting those results in a day.
Well, that would be recommendations.
Okay, right. No, appreciate that. Anything else for the good of the group? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll, thank you, David.
Thank you.
So, we will not stay here too much longer. So, upcoming dates, usual stuff. We're meeting in August, what, August 9th?
August 9th. Hopefully we'll have signage by then.
Oh, before then. What's the date today?
27, 26.
Dr. Brown, we will certainly do that.
Send an email to Sean, so hopefully we can connect with the next 2 days.
Right,
Great.
so if Sean's up to it, we typically would, this would have been done already, but since Chris was out of town and we couldn't do the VP thing until today. So good. Anything else? We're good?
We adjourn.
Without objection? Thank you, everyone.
I won't be here either on the 9th.
I have to get my daughter up.